Hello everybody. So, oh my goodness, I was looking at the Wikipedia article about Charlie Kirk's murder, and I think I've already said how ridiculous his main article is. But look, I'm going to comment on both. I mean, I often talk about how insanely bad Wikipedia is, and a lot of people, and the problem is, if something's insanely bad, but everyone knows it's insanely bad, it's okay, it's fine, it's harmless. I mean, it's not like if you go to 4chan and you say, alright, 4chan's wonderful. Oh no, shocking, I'm wrong. You know, you go to 4chan and you know that it's going to be bad. You know that it's going to be inaccurate, it might be some memes, and it's probably going to have some really toxic bullying. Depending on which side of it you were on, you're either going to be the bully, maybe you're going to be entertained by the bully, or you're going to be targeted. And a lot of places have reputations. Sometimes they're not completely accurate, but most of the time they're at least generally fairly accurate. You know. But the real problem is when you come with a place that has a good reputation that's not deserved, and then it can cause problems. So Wikipedia, I think I've said before, is it is accurate about some things. I'll often say, you know, if you go and look at anything to do with SpongeBob SquarePants, it's wonderful. You know, you can look up any episode, any character, anything to do with it, and it's just perfect. And I mean, obviously, just about any TV show, it'll be really good. Now, of course, it's not great to look at for movies because they love to spoil the plot, and sometimes they get it wrong. I was looking it up for a movie I was watching, and it was Nora. I think it was Nora, and they say that at the end, Nora gets back with her ex-boyfriend, but that doesn't happen. Because at the end, she kisses one of the guys that had kidnapped her. That's not a boyfriend, that's a different guy. So whoever wrote that hadn't watched the movie, or had sort of dozed off at some point and got different people confused with each other. Different people, not the same guy. But that's just a mistake, and you know, you get mistakes every so often. Such mistakes are pretty harmless, obviously, in a plot like that can be easily fixed, it's not a problem. And you know, we talk about there being vandalism on Wikipedia. They always go on about vandalism. Vandalism is not actually a problem. So people do go on there and they go, ha 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 ha, let's change this thing. Do you know that Wikipedia never bans anyone for vandalism? It just never happens. They will remove them and say, ha ha, funny joke guy, and that's the end of the story. So they go on about how, you know, that's the main problem they have. But the main problem they actually have is that they blatantly lie. And they blatantly lie in important issues. Now, they won't blatantly lie about SpongeBob SquarePants. They'll blatantly lie about political figures. So US presidents obviously is their main focus for all of their worst lying. And they will lie to make the presidents they like look great, the presidents they don't like look bad. And obviously the rough cut-off was when they started in 2001. So anything before that they might be reasonably accurate about, but anything since then they're not going to be. And the more recent it is, the worse it is. Now, so if you go and look at anything to do with Donald Trump, for example, it's the worst written article probably on the whole of Wikipedia. And it's just full of falsehoods all over the place. And then they have sub-articles that are complete rubbish. And, you know, and it's all aimed to really destroy his reputation and image. And it's not subtle. It's quite blatant and it's horrible. And the funny thing is, if you go back in the history and you go and look at him before he became the president or before he even ran, and the article was different. And it wasn't just different because his life changed, but because he wasn't a Republican. Before that he was a registered independent, before that he was a registered Democrat. And before that, nobody cared about his political position. And it would have some negative bits, but it'd have a lot of positive bits, and it'd try to maintain mainly generally positive. So they'll claim that he became awful. Well, I don't think he did. I think it's just his political affiliation changed. I don't think he changed as a person. And you can look at Elon Musk, who was supporting Democrats fairly recently. Suddenly his page just completely transformed. If you look at Tulsi Gabbard, was in the Democrat Party as a representative until fairly recently. Her page was wonderful. A few minor things, and then suddenly, boom, horrible. So the page on Charlie Kirk is dishonest. So there's a lot of complete falsehoods there. Looking at that page, I'd have no idea that his main thing is that he's a YouTuber and social media personality, which is probably why I'd never heard of him, who would say, prove me wrong. You know, sit up a bench and then say, prove me wrong. So, you know, trying to be a professional debater, but he cheats. Because he moderates his own debates. So you say something, he'll say, no, you're wrong. You say something, he'll say, no, I don't know enough about that. He'll say you're wrong. So if you actually ever win a debate against him, he'll say you're wrong. And I saw this a few times. People did win debates. Now, I don't care if he's lying. And it's misinformation. Oh no, the evil misinformation, according to Wikipedia. I don't care about that. You know, people in debates often say things that are not completely true. That's just the nature of debating. That's why you have a mediator. That's why you have somebody in the middle there who, after you finish saying, well, whatever he's saying, they won't interrupt you. That was completely inappropriate when they did that to Donald Trump. But in a professional debate, they will let you finish, and then they'll say, now, we have heard from our moderating team, and this is not correct. So if you debate in, let's say in high school, at university, whatever level you're doing it at, or professionally, and there are professional debate groups, they moderate debates by letting you finish your bit, and then they will make a comment afterwards before the next group can talk. That's the time to moderate. They don't let you interrupt. You're not allowed to do that. Although in some cases you're allowed to a certain degree, but you can't just take over. Yep. But he's a cheater. So he's just a blatant cheater who wins debates not because he's a good debater, but because he's a cheater. Now, is he a good debater? I don't think he is. But I had no idea that he was this guy that was this cheating debater. I'm not going to say that he was dishonest. I don't care about that. A lot of debates are very dishonest. That's not the factor. The fact is that he cheats. He creates rules that guarantee that he'll win, no matter what. And I think that's what you could say is the most annoying element of it. Wikipedia doesn't mention that. It doesn't mention that he cheats. It doesn't mention that he sets rules so that he cannot lose. They just say, oh, he lies. So what? So he says things that you don't think are true. So what? So what does that have to do with debating? That's what moderators are for. That's what moderators are there to say, hey, look, on this particular point, sorry about that, we'll just have to correct this. Could you go back and make a different answer? Because that's how you do it. You don't do it in that nasty way that they were doing to Donald Trump in political debates. You do it by interrupting him or putting it up and just say, that's not right. No, you'd say it in between, and then they'd say, okay, so that's okay. Because people make mistakes. And you just go back there and then you change your answer. Or you'd have the option to change your answer and say, well, I'm sorry, I'll avoid that bit and I'll say it like this. You have the option to do that. Now, they shouldn't be moderating every single thing, but, occasionally they'll just point that out. Maybe they might even stop you halfway through a point. But that's how debates are run. And so he cheats, and I'd without question, I'd say that some of the political debates we saw with Donald Trump, the moderator was cheating, or being extremely unfair by not letting him speak, by interrupting him. But stopping him from interrupting was probably fair enough. So Wikipedia's article on him is dishonest. It's not just bias. I don't care about bias. It was just lying. And this is the thing that Wikipedia, you might think, oh, well, if it's wrong, just fix it. But they don't let you fix it. So anyone that tries to fix that will find a whole bunch of people saying, no, you're not allowed to fix it. And I mean, I haven't tried on that article, but I've tried it on other things, and they just stop you. And they will, if you persist beyond, once, we try to argue the point, they will ban you for life. And there's no coming back from that. There's no arguing against that. So the most common reason that Wikipedia ban people is because they're correct. So they're correcting a falsehood. And now, I think, but they tell you to correct falsehoods. Yeah, but they tell you that, but they don't want you to. They don't want you to correct them. Sure, they might be okay with you correcting the little movie about Honora, where actually she doesn't come back to her boyfriend, she actually tries to kiss, or does kiss. Actually, no. She has sex with the guy that kidnapped her. Anyway, it's not a boyfriend. It's a kidnapper. Different person. About 10-year age gap. Unrelated. Different countries. But anyway, different person. But perhaps all Russians look the same. I mean, although that guy was Armenian. I don't know, it's like her boyfriend had lots of hair. This guy's bald. Can't tell them apart, apparently. So if you corrected that, you might be okay. But if you correct something about Charlie Kirk, you're not allowed to. So you would not be allowed to correct that. So if you think that, oh, well, why is the article like that if it's false? Because they won't let you fix it. So they have what they call a neutral point of view, which is a lie. That's basically, well, what that actually means is that they want you to keep their point of view. Not a neutral point of view, but theirs. And then I had a look at the article about the shooting, and so they've recently added the guy's name. Good on them. Good on them for adding the guy's name. So everybody else has had it there for a week. They've just added it. Good on them. There's no separate article on him. You can't click on his name to find out who he is, but they'll tell you the suspect, they say. Not the shooter, but the suspect. Okay. I mean, from a legal point of view, he hasn't been found guilty of anything, he hasn't confessed, so we have to say the suspect. Fair enough. And then they poo-poo as conspiracy theories supposed motivations. So pretty much everyone has said, well, we're looking at the inscriptions on the bullets. They've not mentioned that in Wikipedia. They've not mentioned the verified inscriptions that were definitely on bullets. They don't mention them. So because they haven't mentioned them, it's almost as if we've made that up. Didn't that come from official police reports though? Didn't they show us pictures of them? Isn't that proven? Why have they not got that? They just don't want to. So because they don't have that, therefore any evidence coming from that is not allowed. So we've got gun casings being inscribed with pro-trans comments. And because they're ignoring that, they therefore say that it's misinformation and a conspiracy theory to dare suggest that this had anything to do with trans. What? He had a trans girlfriend. No, not a girlfriend. It was his roommate, who may or may not have been trans, they say, and that's irrelevant. Okay. And then they've gone in there and they've said, oh, he wasn't a Democrat, he wasn't left-leaning, he was a Republican. Well, no, actually they've said his father was a Republican. We don't know what he was. We don't have a clue what he is. And they've ignored all of the publicly released information about chat logs and all that sort of stuff. And the other gun casings saying how much he supports Antifa and all these other things. So they just say, well, that's all misinformation. Well, no, guys, no. Look, misinformation would be something that's just wrong. This is something that's confirmed. I mean, confirmed stuff is not misinformation. It is to Wikipedia. Don't get them wrong. No. Whatever they say is true, and anything else is misinformation. Now, I actually think that Wikipedia's debating style is probably just as bad as Charlie Kirk's, and I've just criticised Charlie Kirk's debating style as being cheating. And so is Wikipedia's, because they set rules that you don't know that the rules are there, because they're not what the rules they list. They ban you themselves, so they're the judge, jury and executioner while they're arguing with you. So you don't get to say you don't have any rights. They say it's a fair debate. They say, well, we're all fair, we're nice. Look, we'll even let those horrible people that, change articles and put stupid comments in, we let them continue. We'll let vandals continue. Vandalism, but you're much worse than that. You must be an awful person. But I just corrected an obvious mistake. No, you're an awful, evil person. Yeah. So, yeah. So their coverage of this article and this situation is horrendous. And I think what makes it particularly horrendous is that the shooting itself was based on this sort of rhetoric that Wikipedia are pushing. So Wikipedia are in some way responsible for this murder. They don't want to mention that. But then, not just them, but a number of other groups that have lied about this situation before it happened. I'm talking about the Charlie Kirk situation. If you want to criticise him, I would say the big criticism is that he's a cheater. He cheats in his arguments. I'd say that was a big criticism. I wasn't aware of the guy, so I didn't have that criticism. I have it now. I've looked at it and I've gone, no, you're a cheater. I can just imagine trying to debate with him, and he's made it so you can't win. He's claiming to be listening to, voices from the other side, but he's doing so in a way that he's not really listening. He's pretending to listen. He's talking down to them, and he's making sure that he will guarantee to win. So that's a very dishonest way to argue with people. Now, I'd compare that with Joe Rogan. Now, I have barely seen anything from Joe Rogan, but Joe Rogan is not so dishonest when he argues with people. And, he will let people talk. Because Joe Rogan is very centrist. And this is the difference. I don't think there's any doubt that Charlie Kirk is on the right. He's not centrist. He's quite, I don't know if I'd say far right, but certainly middle right. I don't think he's a far right extremist. I think you can get further right than that. But he's a hard right. So he doesn't budge. He's stubborn as shit, and yeah. So I'd say hard right, and I'd say middle right. I wouldn't say centrist. So Joe Rogan I'd probably describe as centrist. And there's a degree of fairness with Joe Rogan that doesn't exist in Charlie Kirk. Not because Charlie Kirk's further to the right, because Charlie Kirk is not a far right extremist. It's more because he cheats. Somebody that cheats in debates, you could say, well, what should you be doing about that? I'd probably point out that it's cheating. You know how I couldn't find anyone that's pointed out that he's cheating. It's almost like nobody noticed. Am I the only one that noticed that? How could you not notice? But no, because they're busy focusing on these false claims. So they make it up. They imagine that he's a far right extremist, but he's not. And they're going, well, he lies, as if that's a big deal. Well, he gets things wrong. I'm not sure that he's lying so much as he's getting things wrong. And I think most people get things wrong. Well, I'd say everyone gets things wrong occasionally. And it's just sort of a sign that he's 31 years old. He's not that old. He's not that smart. And, I wouldn't say that he's definitely deliberately lying so much as, he just wants to win debates. And I shouldn't say anybody's names, but I know a lot of people in my personal life that will lie to win arguments. They don't get shot for it. They might make people angry, but it's quite a common thing that, you're losing an argument, so you start lying. And then he just sends them on their way. So I've seen him lose arguments, lots of arguments, But that's what he does, and he'll say, "No, you're wrong. Off you go," and then he'll make fun of them. And they've just won the argument. Now, I've seen a lot of them lost arguments too, but he'd win most arguments. Although again, he's cheating. But I did see him lose arguments in that small piece that I saw. And I'm not sure I want to see all of it. I don't need to. It's not very interesting to me. I mean, seeing somebody cheat in a debate, I don't see what's the point of that. That's not anything that interests me. And if I want to see a debate, I'll see a proper debate. I don't even watch Joe Rogan, and I mean, Joe Rogan's a much fairer debater, but it's not really interesting. I mean, maybe if it's an interesting topic, but a lot of these, the ones that Charlie Kirk, he's going up against kids. He's essentially verbally bullying kids, talking down to them, all that sort of stuff. I'd never do that. I could win debates against university students. Of course I could. It wouldn't be difficult. I think most people of my age could do that without cheating. Let alone if we cheated like he did. Of course you could win it. It wouldn't be difficult. But no, I could easily win debates against university kids on perhaps not quite every topic, but obviously there's some topics I'm not that averse with, and some that they will be. But yeah, anyway, that's what I wanted to say about that. Wikipedia's shameful. Bye bye now.